We have a packed show today. You see an instruction on your screen, and I'd like all of you to follow that instruction right now. That's why the pug is pointing right at you, because this means you. We are changing the date of this webcast starting next month in January 2024. And all of your existing registrations are going to blow up. They're not going to work anymore. So if you want to continue being a part of this, please take 30 seconds. I promise it only takes 30 seconds right now. Go to that link, datacentral.com/2024. Go there literally right now as I'm speaking and trying to work out the audio issues. Go there right now and get yourself registered so you are invited into this for all of next year. So I'll give you both, give you all a minute to do that. It's really awkward, guys. I can't hear you, so I'm going to turn it over to you to just chatter for a minute or so while I try to find an alternate way of getting some audio. So Shara, you want to maybe lead a quick conversation with we and Claire about whatever interesting food topic comes to mind?
Certainly. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Response. Fantastic. Thank you, Hui and Claire, for letting me join the webinar today. I'll be sharing a little bit about this new project that I am working on that if you are following the Data Central LinkedIn feed or our press release that went out today, I'll be sharing a little bit as we go on. But before we dive into that, happy to hand it over to you, Hui and Claire, for any quick insights and maybe a little sprinkling of the webinar to come.
Yeah, totally. So I think something that we are really excited
guys,
to share about today. Oh, are you back, Jack?
I know I'm cutting somebody off, and I apologize.
Oh, no.
But we're going to go ahead and get this thing started, and I promise we'll get the audio figured out shortly. So, I think I probably cut you off. 1,000 apologies to you.
That's all right.
But we do have a brand new date for this web series going forward starting next month. It has moved from the first Thursday of each month to the second Thursday of each month at the exact same time, 12 o'clock Central. The time hasn't changed, but the Thursday has changed from the very first Thursday to the second Thursday. And if you haven't had a chance in the last 3 or 4 minutes yet to go to that registration link, please visit it right now, datacentral.com/2024, and get yourself registered. With that in mind, we're going to continue down this road of disrupted audio, but chock full of exciting content. This is sort of ironic. I can't hear what anyone's saying, and I'm telling you about communicating, because I'm going to tell you right now that you could use chat to communicate with not just us, but everyone that's attending, all your friends, colleagues from around the industry, hundreds, if not thousands of people that are from this wonderful food and food service industry. When you do chat, make sure you choose that everyone option, so you're sharing your thoughts, hellos with everyone. And to get that chat sort of going, I want you all to take maybe just a 5-second, thought in your head. This does not have to be a super well rationed or super well thought out thing. You don't have to engage in deep introspection. Just first thing that comes to your mind, what do you think was the top food story of this past year? Could be something, important to you personally. It could be a big epic, topic for the fate of humanity. As long as that's something to do with food, what do you think was that big thing? And I'm sort of curious to see what the comments stream back as. So give that a quick thought. Again, don't think too much, 5 seconds, and just type it in and say hi to all your friends and colleagues from around the industry. Now, we do have with us today Shara, and she is going to provide us a little overview of something really cool that we have planned for next year. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn it over to you. And when you're done, because I can't hear you, you're going to give me a big thumbs up, and then I'll know that it's time to go. So the mic is yours.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jack. I'm really excited to be here today and to lead this project along with the incredible team here at Data Central. So Data Central Elevate. We know that many in our industry work on small teams, trying to figure out the most complex issues and navigate disruptions through one lens. So Elevate will bring together a community of leaders across various segments of the food and beverage ecosystem, including operators, manufacturers, distributors, and retail, to think outside our boxes in order to drive the industry forward. The community will build upon the skills and the expertise of the members combined with Data Central's platform and our incredible trend forward team. As one client recently pointed out to me, there's no shortage of information in our industry, but this opportunity is really unique to curate and distill the insights from a diverse set of perspectives. So we will have multiple touch points throughout the year, and we'll engage in interactive forums, unique experiences, and exclusive insights in order to facilitate some creative collaboration amongst the members on the industry's future. Some of the early themes we've identified as potential collaborations include harnessing AI, impactful choices on sustainability and modern innovation strategies, key traffic drivers, as well as staying ahead of cutting edge technology. So if you're interested in learning more about this really new initiative, please reach out to your Data Central account rep to schedule a call. And with that, I will hand it back to you, Jack, for the year-end review. And back to you, Jack, as well as Claire and Hui, so that we can dive into all the incredible insights that
all right, thank you. I see the thumbs up. I think what he said was awesome. I don't know for sure, but I expect it was pretty fantastic. So, Shara, we're gonna move forward, and I'm gonna find a way to sort of drop you off as we continue with Claire and Hui instead. Great. So, today's content is really going to be about, I think you sort of call it like, interesting things that have happened in 2023 that set us up for even more interesting things in 2024. But I did want to remind everyone, I think most of you are using Report Pro, maybe almost all of you are using Report Pro at this point. We have some great new reports that just got published in the Report Pro, including this very, very deep dive into all things happening in healthcare food service, over 100 pages, just amazing detail on the perspective of consumers and operators and all the trends that are important there. If you sell to this segment, you'll want to look that up. And again, it's in Report Pro right now. We have sort of a preview, a sneak peek of our 2024 trend report. That's there right now too. This person looks quite lazy. I don't know if that's a trend for 2024. Just it's very, very, I think, depressing commentary about society, but there's also very exciting and positive stuff in that report too. So go check it out. 2024 Trends is in Report Pro right now. And we have a great report on just dining habits, traveling, right? We've seen travel has been spiking recently. I think we said we just had one of the busiest airport days of all time, just around Thanksgiving. So what the heck are people doing when they're traveling? How are they thinking about food? What decisions are they making? Because this becomes a more growingly important piece of business for us all. And finally, there's just a ton of content inside of Report Pro. We're well beyond 1,000 plus reports now. I'm not even sure what the exact count is, but literally every single day you're finding new stuff in here. So take some time to rummage around in there. It's just a great, great resource to add context to all the data that you're getting from us. Okay, so with that in mind, Claire, you're going to get us started on some brand performance data. This comes from one of our trackers that looks at how consumers perceive a few hundred chains across the U.S. as in terms of, do they like the food there? How is their experience? And over 100 other metrics. And Claire, I'm going to give this over to you. And I think we have to figure out like a hand signaling sort of protocol as well. So if you want to give me like a salute, a thumbs up, big, ridiculous smile that's unnatural. Scratch at the back or head is good too. We'll use any one of those. So I'll wait for your first signal and I'll use that as my visual cue to go to the next slide.
Okay. Then I guess we
And
can just
remember,
go
I'm not going to the next
slide.
slide until I see that cue. All right, there we go.
Okay, so as Jack mentioned, this is all from our brand performance tool within the Data Central Snap platform. And we looked at the past year metrics to find some core metric gainers. So we do every month, we do a report on some interesting information from this tool. And the last one of the year, rightfully so, is going to be core metric gainers to figure out what's changed. So I looked at some of the key ones, including have recommended. It's always nice if you have recommended a chain to a friend. We don't always feel the need to tell our friends about these chains we're going to. And so this year, we can hear you on your phone, Jack. This year we have Smoothie King, and the year time frame for this is year ending November 2023 to year ending 2022. So Smoothie King is up +5 points, and World of Beer is also up +5 points. So.
All right, and
we still signaling until you tell me otherwise. We also looked at another core metric, and I feel like the Net Promoter Score is one we see across any type of industry, right? You want to look at basically the question is how likely would you be to recommend, and then you get your promoters, your detractors, and then your middle people are passive, and then you can get a score that can be negative all the way up to positive. It's not common that you have more detractors than you have promoters, especially not for food. It's less common. So our gainers in this with an 8-point gain for Nukes and Cotton Patch, Texas. And then also a 7-point gain for Old Chicago Pizza Tap Room. So those are our core metric gainers for Net Promoter Score.
So Claire, I have 2 questions for you. 1, can you hear me?
Yes.
And 2, oh wait, you could actually see. I gotta stop. And 2, am I echoing?
I don't think so. I think we're good.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess I'm doing this. Well, I got a phone to my head, and this is probably not great, but okay. So I think what you're showing us here that these are the gains in parentheses that have been made over the prior year, and these are the 3 brands that had the biggest positive change in NPS.
Correct.
Do you know, just remembering, did most brands have an increase, or are they mostly flat? Are these real outliers, or were these just slightly better than everybody else?
I mean, it takes a long time for anything to shift in this tool, so nothing moves a ton. I would say overall, the majority had positive gains, but none as significant as these. So there were more like +2 or +3, a handful in the +4 range. So +7, +8 are pretty big gains.
Yeah, and if you look at sort of our data that we have on brand performance, there's quite a lot there. One of the things that we can sort of explore too is what we call that sort of brand journey, right? For consumers as it relates to a particular brand. So we just talked about Nukes, for instance. And one of the things that we could see for a brand like Nukes is like, hey, what percentage of consumers that live in an area where there is a Nukes have even heard of a Nukes? In that case, the answer is 40%, right? In metro markets where Nukes exists, there's about 40% awareness. And then of that 40%, what number of consumers would consider visiting a Nukes? Then what number went on to try it? What percentage, of those that try that then went on to say, hey, not only did I try it, but I'm sort of loyal to the brand. And finally, what percentage actually went on to make a recommendation of the brand? But in the case of Nukes, you look at the funnel, and it's really sort of awareness is the major first barrier in that funnel, right? You go from 100% of the population to just 40% that are aware of the brand, but of those aware, a massive percentage, right? 35, versus the 40 have actually considered going there at some point. So this is sort of a nice way of digesting what the journey is for each brand relative to the consumers in those areas. But if we want to look at what sort of actually changed a bit over the past year, can you talk about like last visit and what that actually represents?
Yeah, so these are the consumer ratings for their last visit. In this case, I only looked at the top box. So we have excellent and then very good and then some others. I wanted to really see, I think it's all well and good to have very good visits. That's not going to be bad for your brand, but to really make huge changes, to have people have an excellent visit, that's what's going to drive you to come back, right? Having a very good visit, I'll be back, but I'm not going to be back maybe, within the next week or two or bringing my friends. Excellent is really going to be what moves the needle. So these are ones that have increased on that excellent last visit, though how the increases happened change by brand. So for example, Cotton Patch, it's actually that they've moved some of those very good visits upwards into the excellent range, whereas more for Salad Works, they've actually had increases both for excellent and very good. So how those gains are happening vary a little bit by brand.
And I think we found too that Cotton Patch overall was the most improved across multiple metrics, right?
Yeah.
Can we talk about some of
The
those?
main report that will be released shortly here in Report Pro has all the core metrics, and Cotton Patch was the most repetitively seen chain. And so I wanted to dig into why, of course. And then on sort of a basic front, it's, they had 30 menu launches. They're increasing units. They're a pretty small chain. I think it's around 50 units, which really helps you kind of improve those metrics over time. And when we dig in, they had good metrics increases on every single metric in customer experience grew, and every single metric in our value proposition grew, but it wasn't necessarily that they've shifted who their consumer is. So these are true gains for them.
So can I tell you guys something sort of funny? Maybe it's not that funny, but I'm doing this weird dance where I'm listening with my phone, but the phone I know is causing a minor echo. So I'm doing this weird dance of muting and unmuting myself. And then when I unmute myself, I then have to take my phone because Zoom plays through the speaker as though you're on speakerphone as opposed to just the ear part. And I have to like sit on my phone to prevent as much as sound from escaping from my phone as possible. So if you see me squirming in my seat, that would be the reason why. And I apologize for that. So
It's
full
it's pretty
transparency
masterful.
here at Data Central. Okay. Thank you, Claire. We're going to come back to you in just a little while to talk about what's happening on the menu, both here and around the world. I think you have tons of interesting stuff to talk to us about how consumers are perceiving things and the way that's changed over the past years. So let's go ahead and get started. So what are we seeing here?
Yeah, totally. So let's take it back first, actually, to the question that you asked at the beginning of the webinar. What is the top food story of 2023? And I was paying pretty close attention to the chat when that was happening. And it seems that the #1 unanimous answer across the entire chat panel was some combination of price increases, inflation, cost of goods and services. So it's very clear that in this panel of, industry professionals who are joining us in this webinar today, that is the most important story of the year. And it seems indeed that this is also what consumers are thinking about. So the graph that you're seeing here represents a net of consumers who feel very or extremely concerned about these aspects of their lives, from inflation to political instability to international conflicts to recession. And 3/4 of consumers are very or extremely concerned right now about inflation and rising costs of living. It's the most important metric to how they gauge their quality of life. And if you could move on to the next slide, Jack. Do I still need a signal? Okay, good. You can hear me. You can see here that throughout this past year, we've tracked consumers' perception of their financial situation on a monthly basis. So what you're seeing on this graph here is consumers indicating whether or not they're falling behind financially or they're getting ahead financially. And like most of this tracking data, or in various versions that we presented in the past, I feel like Jackie would agree with me here that the most interesting thing here is not the individual lines themselves, but rather the gap between the amount of consumers who say that they're falling behind versus the amount of consumers who are getting ahead. And we can sort of see here that it stayed relatively consistent. Most consumers are saying that, I'm doing okay financially, but around 1 in 5 to 1 in 4 consumers across 2023 are still indicating that they're falling behind financially, and perhaps that their wages and their income is still not matching the rate at which food costs and other costs of living are rising. Yeah.
I know we in the past, we've looked at this, and you've looked at this a little bit more closely, and we've seen some sort of a stratification as well. It's not like this is representative of all consumers. It's almost like there's a bifurcation of consumers that were doing well and those that were having a tougher time. And it's almost like the rich were sort of getting richer in
Yep.
some to some extent. And can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, that's a level of fidelity. That's a level of fidelity that I would love to get to, but yeah, I think your instincts are correct. It seems that like high income consumers seem to be doing really well when we parse that data through income levels, and lower income consumers are more likely to say that they're falling behind. So the ability to keep up with price increases is very much determined by where you are financially, and it does seem from what we have that like the rich seem to be getting richer. It's a tough sell in today's economy. But if we could move on to the next slide, we can actually also see how this translates to how consumers are approaching their dining out, which I think is what our attendees are really caring about.
Yeah, I think we saw that in the data. I mean, we've seen it, I think, fairly consistently each time we've looked at this in a little more detail. It's, consumers that were sort of already comfortable, like they're more or less still okay. And, things might be a little bit more challenging, but it's not backbreaking. Consumers that were already in a challenged position, they tend to be far more challenged than they were before. So we should just remember that. I mean, there's an entire stratification of consumers out there that are really having a tougher time. And as we saw in the earlier slide, the rising cost of things, with food being preeminent among them, is really a big driver of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And before we move on to the next slide, or you can transition to, just wanted to clarify with everyone in chat who's been asking, most of the data that you're going to see in the next like 20 to 30 slides have been fielded on a monthly basis since the beginning of last year, and any of the most recent data that we have was fielded in November 2023. So this is super hot off the press. So we can see here is a graph of sort of like dining out expectations. So we ask consumers every single month, like for the month ahead, are you expecting to dine out more at restaurants and food service venues, dine out at the same frequency, or dine out less or stop altogether? And we can see here, overall, most consumers, around half, are saying that, they are, they'll maintain their dining out capacity. They're free, and then the other half seems to be pretty split between dine out less, dine out more, or versus dine out more. So there hasn't been a lot of variance since the last time that we presented this data in August 2023. There are several moments within the past year where consumers were very, very hard pressed to dine out, as you can see in like February. But overall, like it seems that consumers are still sort of biting out the market and sort of maintaining their dining out frequency. Is that sort of the sentiment you're also getting here, Jack?
It is, and I think we're just seeing some minor cycles. I think the big stories are the ones that we've seen basically all year long.
Yep.
And that takes us to dining out expectations. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, it's the exact same graph, but over here we were again examining the gaps. So the line that you're seeing here is percentage of consumers who are dining out more, taking away from percentage of consumers who are dining out less. And you can see here that the various large gaps that you can see here are tied to sort of economic stories of the year in February, over the summer. You can see the sort of like minus 18% in November of last year and minus 7% in November of this year. We're observing that also, that like at around the end of the year holiday, consumers tend to indicate that they might dine out less, not perhaps because of any economic factors, but more so just perhaps that, they're celebrating with family, they're staying home more, it's cold, they don't want to get out more. So there are multiple factors that can influence their dining out expectations, and not just the economy. Yeah. So over here, we also ask consumers on a monthly basis whether or not, because of inflation, because of cost of living are rising, what aspects of their lives and their spending have they cut back on? And that data has been pretty consistent on a month-to-month basis, you see here that almost half of consumers last month have cut back on their restaurant and dining out. That figure stayed pretty consistent at the top of the chart, and it seems that like out of all aspects of their lives, dining out and restaurant food seems perhaps to be the easiest for consumers to visualize themselves cutting back, and so do.
And can you remind us? I know in the past we've looked at this sort of forward-looking when we first started getting a sense of inflation a couple of years ago. The question is, if the economy doesn't get better, where do you plan to make cutbacks? Is this sort of a backwards looking thing? Like, hey, you've already made the cutbacks, or is this more of a forward looking, like, where do you plan to do it?
So this question, since we started tracking it this year and last, is actually a backward looking thing. So this was a last month basis.
Yeah. Okay. So it's already happening. It's already happening, right? So
it's
what
already
they said they were going to do or things they've started doing. And it's interesting. You look at the sort of ranked things on this list. I mean, alcohol, people don't cut back on alcohol as much as they do a lot of these food things. And the other things tend to be necessities. So,
but also with any sort of alcoholic beverages, you also have to keep in mind that like if you don't drink alcohol, you're not any likely to cut back. So that also might be a reason why that number is like slightly lower on this chart. But also, if you look at this next chart, thank you for transitioning slides, you're actually seeing here, it may not seem like a huge variance between these three lines. I've mapped out how this figure has progressed in the past year and a half since we've properly tracked this data. And actually, it seems as though the consumers are actually cutting back slightly less since we started tracking this figure in July 2022. It was 57% cutting back on restaurant food. Now it's 46% in November. And then at the green line at the bottom is the percentage of consumers who say they have not cut back on any of those metrics that you see in the slide above at all. And it was 10% last year, and now it's around 20%. So that line is gradually going up, and the number of consumers who are cutting back on these various metrics are actually like slightly decreasing. So this might actually be a pretty positive sign, a gradual and slow one, but a positive sign nonetheless.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind is as we follow the inflation story, what we saw early on was, grocery store prices started going up, and restaurants tended to lag that in terms of raising menu prices. There was a period of time before we started seeing any real inflation at restaurants, and then when there was inflation on the menu, it tended to be with chain restaurants first. So I think almost had to take price increases as a matter of financial necessity, right? It's just sort of built into their model. And independents raised prices really, really slowly. Over the past several months, independents have now started raising their prices more and more, but it still has not yet caught up with the overall inflation we've seen in food. So if the pattern holds, and I think it will hold, restaurant food will probably still continue to get more expensive relative to the increases we've already seen for food at home, just until we get to like a new level of homeostasis, essentially. So we'll see if that depresses demand for dining out. My sense is it probably won't that much because consumers have sort of adjusted to like a new inflationary mindset anyways, and it's almost just an expectation. But I would look for menu prices to still sort of increase at a faster rate than we've seen elsewhere, just because there's some catch up that needs to happen.
Definitely. And I feel like with the recession story that we've been tracking for the past year and a half, it seems that the dominant story here is that even though consumers are noticing inflation in every domain of their lives, it seems that they are not as willing to decrease their expenditures, especially in terms of like restaurant and food and experiences, quite at the rate at which we're seeing inflation going. So there's some level of recessionary resistance that we're noticing, which is a very interesting phenomenon to look at. Over here, we ask consumers, hypothetically, if right now you have an unexpected $400 expense come in all of a sudden, are you able to cover that expense in some way, shape, or form? And we see that around 50% of consumers are actually saying that, like, I am able to cover an unexpected expense, either using money from my savings or by adjusting my budget. But the other, like roughly 50%, would either have to put that expense on a credit card or go into debt, would have to borrow money for someone else, or would not even know what to do when that unexpected purchase happens. So it's really a tough balancing act for consumers. And the reason why we present it here is that we asked this question during December of last year, just to see if perhaps consumers' ability to cover unexpected expenses have improved or worsened, and this distribution is practically the same. So consumers are just as likely or not to be able to cover unexpected large expenses now versus a year ago.
Yeah, and I think just to be clear, I don't think this is a new phenomenon, right?
No.
This has been the case for many years. So I don't think we want to overstate that this is like something that just happened in the wake of inflation. I think as far back as I can remember, a stat similar to this, $400, $600, whatever it is, has sort of always been at play. That's just sort of the state of things.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And then we also ask consumers, among these various types of purchases, which of these would you consider affordable luxuries that you can either spend or get rid of when things are tough? So just to make sure, I want to bring up the question text to not mislead folks into thinking of what we're asking here. But the question that we asked was, give me 1 second here. Apologize for the delay. These are discretionary spending categories. Which of them would you consider to be an affordable luxury that you could do without or find cheaper alternatives if costs increase or things get rough? And you can see here that streaming and entertainment and also dining out and preferred brands of food and drinks are things that consumers would sort of consider affordable luxuries that they can either trade down or sacrifice if things get tough. We asked that same question also a year ago, and there hasn't really been that much movement. So I think these categories of spending are things that consumers consider to be things that are easiest to imagine trading down, right? Does that make sense? And does that make sense, Jack? I see you're making.
Yeah, and I think to me, like the really interesting stuff is you look at dining out at 40%, and then you look at restaurant meal delivery at 20%, which is a pretty substantial gap, right? So some stuff is worth spending more for, or you feel like the value equation still makes sense in some cases, but restaurant meal delivery, feels pretty expensive to some people, and it's half the number. Yep. You go look at the preferred brands of food and drink, more so than the preferred brands of booze. But I think partly that's what you said before. Some people just don't drink, right? So
yep, right.
That's the plus that number.
Right. Yeah. So Kevin brought up a really interesting point of they skip drinks, appetizers, or desserts in chat. We're actually going to get that in about 2 slides. So hold on to that thought. All right. So we also ask consumers, with all of these considerations in mind, how are you saving money at grocery stores if you're noticing inflation for all of your grocery products? And, overall, it seems that over 80% of consumers are adopting some strategy or another to save money at grocery stores. And the top ones seems to be that, using private label or store brands instead of, more expensive products, finding coupons to clip, visiting lower cost grocery stores instead of more prestige grocery stores, and shopping at multiple stores to find the lowest prices. Around over a quarter of consumers are also actually practicing meal prepping, preparing things at home that they could otherwise buy packages. So consumers are actually very amenable to sort of using any strategies that they can get their hands on to save money at grocery stores. If you go to the next slide, Jack, you can also see a similar level of adoption for restaurant and food service venues. Also, 85% of consumers have adopted one strategy or another to save money at at food service venues. Sorry. So Kevin, like you said, around 37% of consumers skip add-ons like sides, appetizers, or desserts when they're ordering entrees at restaurants. Obviously, coupons that come in with the meal. 31% order fewer or skip beverages. So there's a wide variety here of strategies that you can look at on this table to see how consumers are trying their best to save money on a dining out occasion. We also wanted to figure out if, sort of any austerity measures that consumers are adopting also applies to tipping. We did a tipping survey last year to see whether or not sort of tipping culture has been transformed because of the pandemic. And this year we wanted to follow up on some of these questions to see if between 2022 and 2023, consumers' tipping habits and tipping culture have normalized back to pre-pandemic standards. And it seems as though that movement is gradually happening. The data that you're seeing on the slide here is percentage of consumers who always expect to tip at these types of food service venues, starting from sit down to fine dining restaurants to drive-throughs, fast food restaurants, coffee shops, workplace, or school cafeteria. And it seems here that is sort of slowly beginning a normalization journey to sort of pre-pandemic standards in which most consumers expect to tip at sit-down restaurants, and fewer consumers than before are tipping at quick service, fast food, coffee shops, compared to 2022.
So, do you think this is like a pandemic snapback type of thing, or is this just sort of like, consumers reached a boiling point where like the tipping stuff just got so out of control that like, screw this?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think with the pandemic, I think we had a movement of folks tipping more and tipping at unconventional venues, sort of out of respect for the food service employee or like to show that they care. And I think a lot of those courtesy tipping behaviors are starting to be rolled back now, especially since things have gotten so much more expensive. So I think it's a little bit of both.
Can I ask everyone just in the audience, maybe in chat, like, what do you do when you're in a situation and like the screen pops up and says, hey, would you like to leave a tip? And it's at a place where you just never have traditionally thought of it as being a tip appropriate type of an environment, or maybe there's like a tip jar where like we're seeing this in all sorts of places that didn't really exist before. A lot of it's just the switch to those newer POS systems where you have that that mandatory like tip screen that sort of pops up, and there's the expectation that you're adding a tip onto, I don't know, you buy like a pair of shoes or something. It's like, hey, would you like to tip? Like, this is like sort of crazy. What do you all do in that situation? You say yes, you say no, do you do something else? I feel sort of bad like not saying yes, but I also realize that it doesn't feel like it's traditionally appropriate either in some of these instances. I don't know. What do you do?
I am part of the camp that Chad is saying to always guilty tip, to tip anyway, even though it feels like we're being fleeced sometimes. But yeah, I think because our audience is, comprised of a lot of food service professionals that we, feel the plight of the worker or we understand the work. It seems like a 50-50 split between people who tip and people who don't here.
Well, if that's how everyone feels, should I put up a slide asking everyone for a tip right now and see what happens?
Oh my goodness. We're providing a knowledge service, but we're not providing a beverage or a food item. But in the interest of time, I think we should move on, Jack, just to make sure we get everything covered. So this slide, I'm just going to run it through really quickly. We asked consumers, between 2023 and 2022, do you tend to tip more, the same amount, or less? And we see here that, very few consumers say that they tip more. And most consumers say that they, tend to tip the same amount as 2022 or less. And then at the bottom table, we see here the numbers on that table are the mean percentage that a consumer would tip if they received the following types of service. So like, below average service, satisfactory service, good service versus exceptional service. And the only one that hasn't really changed much between this year and last is exceptional service. Consumers are still willing to tip over 20% for exceptional service, but for anything below that, just, regular service, fine to like, crummy service, consumers are not tipping as much as they did in the past year. Moving on to the next slide, Jack, we asked consumers, which aspects of your life have improved for you in 2023? And, it seems that like, across the board, it feels like more things have improved versus worsened in the past year, except for one major metric, which is a personal financial situation at the bottom of the table here. So it seems like over the past year, consumers have found their groove with their family relationships, their health and fitness, their spiritual health, or their diet. But the one aspect that they're still struggling to improve is their financial situation, which leads us to the next slide, Jack, where we ask consumers, for 2024, what would be your, biggest resolutions for the year? And indeed, as you see here, the top resolution for 2024 is still to save more money, right? Exercising more, being happy, improving physical health. All of these things have always been New Year's resolutions for people, and they do comprise a larger need to sort of like continuously improve your health. But money still trumps all of these factors. So it's still very much that, like, at the end of 2023, moving on to 2024, money is still top of mind.
Yeah, money's at 50%. Be happier is at 44%. So I guess money beats happiness is
or money
the
is
takeaway.
happiness in some cases.
Okay. Hey, everyone, quick poll. This is going to be a real fast one. This one's super, super important. You got to answer this one right. I'm going to be really disappointed if you get this one wrong. Here you go. When does the Simply Smarter Show take place in 2024? And you have your choices there. Like, I really hope we get above 90%, right? So far, we're holding it. Ooh, 86%, 83%. Uh-oh. We started at like 95%. So all the people that answered really fast, they knew the answer. But as time went on, people that didn't quite know the answer started making guesses. And we went from 90+%, we're down to 71% getting the right answer now. This is highly, highly disappointing. And I'm just going to shut this thing off right now because it's sort of depressing. So everybody, the answer, if you haven't answered it, you can still press the button because it'll be like a mental reinforcement thing. The answer is the second Thursday of each month. It is the third option on the screen. So if you haven't clicked it, click it now. Just so you sort of like get the biomechanical feedback of knowing when this show is going to be next year. Going forward, starting next month, this happens on the second Thursday of each month, which is actually better than the first Thursday of each month. Everyone knows the second Thursday is always the best Thursday. So we'll see you the second Thursday of each month. Let us continue. And if you haven't had a chance yet, go to datacentral.com/2024 and register right now. Okay, back to you. Let's look at the operator perspective on things. What do you know?
Yep, totally. We presented this slide several months prior in our food service forecast webinar. And what you're seeing here is sort of our operator landscape data that we track using our platform based on total number of restaurants opened, and on a monthly basis, how many restaurants are opening in the US and how many restaurants are closing. If you're a subscriber to our table stakes monthly tracker, you're seeing this data already. So this should not be news to you, but we're basically tracking sort of like the landscape of restaurant openings in the US. Several months prior, the conclusion that we came up during the webinar is that, like, we've reached sort of that 800,000 total restaurants as sort of like a normalization method, like period, in terms of how many restaurants are open. As you can see here, in the past several months, it actually seems that we've reached a period where the green line here, which is new restaurant openings, is actually outpacing the red line, which is restaurant closing. So it seems like in the past few months, we've seen actually an improvement in the industry in terms of number of restaurants that are open. So this is actually a pretty positive sign, Jack. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think the question had been for a long time after this period of growth that we saw coming into early 2020, where restaurants were opening much faster than they were closing. Then all of a sudden things fell off a cliff. At what point would the green line surpass the red line again? And it seems to be comfortably there right now. And again, we're moving back towards that homeostasis, which is probably somewhere north of 800,000 restaurants. So I think you're spot on. And that's good news for the industry. More options to eat is a good thing for people too.
Totally. So very much like consumers, we also ask operators, which aspects of your life and your operation have improved in 2023. And we've actually got some pretty interesting numbers here. Over a third of consumers are saying that, their foot traffic has actually improved in 2023. Same with on-premise venue, same with off-premise revenue, standard of service, rate of menu introductions. A lot of these things, the improvements have actually outpaced the number of consumers who say that these aspects have worsened. So these are some pretty positive signs, though I can't help but wonder if a lot of these improvements are actually just tied to menu price increases in terms of in terms of like, revenue for both on-premise and off-premise. Places in which improvements are actually being surpassed by worsening is indeed the labor issue. So you see employees' morale and performance, staffing turnover, back of house culinary skill, and obviously, like we've mentioned before, the economy and cost of ingredients and supplies. So it seems that operators are doing okay in terms of traffic and sales, but labor and inflation are aspects in which they are struggling the most. And as you can see here, we ask consumers on a monthly basis, which of these aspects of your operation would you say are pressing challenges for you? And indeed, rising food costs and rising labor costs, the two metrics, and also general inflation, the three metrics of inflation are always top of mind for operators. This has consistently been the top three factors over the last 12 months. Followed by recruiting and hiring hourly staff. So inflation and labor are top of mind right now. Similar to consumers, like sort of financial expectations, we also track on a monthly basis operators' traffic expectation for the month ahead. And over here, we're seeing that the gap between operators who say that they're expecting higher traffic versus lower traffic for the month ahead have been relatively stable for the last 12 months or so. So most operators have been relatively optimistic throughout 2023. And that number is sort of like worsening in the past couple of months, but typically we do notice that operators are always expect lower traffic and lower sales at the end of the year because of consumer visitation frequencies. And we're seeing the same pattern, Jack, if you move on to the next slide.
Yeah, and I think the thing that we want to look at in charts like in a graph like this is sort of like the relative changes over time. Like the numbers in any point in time, it's sort of like not super reflective because people tend to be optimistic. Like if I asked all of you, do you think your business will be better next year or worse next year? You're almost all going to say it's going to be better, right? I mean, that's just sort of human nature. What you want to look for is, do you see big peaks and valleys in that trend line somewhere?
Yep, totally. If you can move 2 slides ahead, since sort of this data is just pretty much similar. We delved into also which aspects of labor are operators struggling with the most because people are saying that, we're having trouble hiring and recruiting staff. And it seems that there are multitudes of challenges that operators are dealing with. Primarily, the perception of, food service jobs as a dead-end job has not improved since we fielded this data last year. More operators are saying that they are dealing constantly with rude and inappropriate behaviors from consumers and customers. There's always pressure to pick up shifts when coworkers no-show or quit, so scheduling issues are still very much rampant. There's still an issue with work-life balance for restaurant employees. So all of these are still reigning challenges within the food industry that continues to require being resolved. If we move on to the next slide, Jack, since we're running a little short in time and we wanted to cover everything, we also asked operators, which of these scenarios in terms of supply and sourcing have you dealt with in the past year? And very much the changes between 2023 and 2022 for all of these scenarios have been very minimal. Chad, you can get a copy of the slide deck so you can, after this webinar, so you can delve into these details more closely. But around a third of operators have said that they, have experienced price increases passed along by manufacturers. Nearly half say that distributors have passed along price increases to their sourcing location. So, inflation are still, in terms of sourcing, is still a reigning issue here. We ask operators then, for 2024, what is your ideal sales mix? So between in-person on-premise orders versus telephone versus direct digital versus third-party digital channels like delivery apps or menu aggregators. And much like last year, for 2024, most operators still want to focus on in-person on-premise orders, but we're seeing, a third of on average, around 30% of operators want around 30% of their revenue to be comprised of sort of like off-premise, whether it's telephone pickup or digital channels. So the operators are still very much paying attention to off-premise digital methods of earning revenue. Right. Moving on, if that's the case, if operators are focusing on generating revenue from on-premise in-person orders, what strategies are operators considering for building the check average? Operators are considering a lot of these strategies. The most popular would be adding upcharges for premium add-ons like guacamole in a Mexican restaurant or fries and chips. A lot of operators are already considering or developing a catering menu, so tapping into another channel of revenue. Operators are also adding family meal deals or bundles to increase the check averages at their operations. So lots of strategies to be considered here. And along the same line, we also ask, what strategies are you considering to motivate more consumers to dine in at your location to get more on-premise business? If you could move on to the next slide, Jack. And once again, lots of different strategies here. The most popular being soliciting feedback from customers to enhance brand reputation. It's really interesting that 50% of restaurants have actually increased their presence on social media to incentivize dining in. Nearly half are also focusing on improving service to make the dine-in experience more engaging and more interesting. And over 2 in 5 have also looked to menu-based improvements, from limited time offerings to redesigning their menus to introduce more uniqueness and variety. So operators are really looking at every single channel of their operation to make sure that their in-person on-premise dining experience is as engaging and as motivating as possible to really generate that revenue. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Wee. There's a lot more, and again, this just is barely the tip of the iceberg compared to all the other stuff you're going to find inside of all those reports in Report Pro and the table stakes tracker and much more. I wanted to pivot for a quick second. I thought I would ask ChatGPT, like, what are some of the retro trends we're seeing with Gen Z? And you can sort of, and they put it all into one single photo over here, mom jeans, Polaroid cameras, chokers, fanny packs, old school sneakers. Because I think what we're seeing in some food as well is retro making some sort of a comeback. And I remember this to me feels like a 1990s type of thing you'd sort of see when you went out to the bar, the good old espresso martini. And Claire, you're going to talk to us about, like, my God, it's been taking off again recently, and I have no idea why. And we're predicting it's going to continue to grow at extravagant rates because we have this sort of AI-based platform that can predict with a high degree of accuracy where trends will be in the future. So espresso martinis, a throwback.
Yeah,
Taking off again. What the heck is going on?
Everyone in the comments is noting it is sort of just a circular thing, right? There's some things that come back every 20 or 30 years, some things that come back every 10 or so years. I know I've been doing this about 15 years, and I'm seeing lots of stuff that I saw when I was a new analyst coming back. And this is just one of those things. There's an entire new generation who is interested in kind of trying these, and we're finding ways to make them new and different. The main point of this, though, was to, even though it's something that we all know is trending and it's kind of a point of innovation, there's still so many new ways to do it. And we have databases to help us track that. So this information is all from our concept testing, where we've actually merged 2 former tools into one even more robust tool. So you can see a sneak peek and stuff that's been released, as well as consumer evaluations of those here. So new ideas still offer high appeal. So this one has a 51 score, which for an alcoholic beverage is actually pretty good. Jack, if you can go to the
yeah, but just to clarify, in November alone, we had 4 major chains release an espresso martini.
Correct.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Okay.
And then this is something that we're running out of time, and we want to be respectful of all of your time. So we probably won't get through everything I have here, but we will have a blog post on our website about this type of content, so you can all take a look there too. But this is an example of how we can innovate on that, taking inspiration from the globe. So this is a UK item where they paired the flavors with tiramisu and put kind of a cookie on top. It's, you know, I'm a cappuccino at the end of my meal person, and when you get that little cookie, I feel like someone else from Data Central was talking about it. It just adds like such a special touch. I think they were talking about that. So this is an example of the screen from that new concept testing. And then you've seen slides like this before from our mid-year trends. We wanted to do just a past 3-month look at what's happening because we already reviewed what happened mid-year. So just over the past 3 months, our superstar, there were actually 2 other superstars, but they didn't do so hot on purchase intent. I wanted something that at least also offered us stronger purchase intent. So I picked the churro donut superstar as our item. This one has
And to clarify, these are the top scoring items among over 50,000 historically, and I think about 500 a month from major chains.
Yeah, so just the past 3 months. And the 99 composite is like the best you can do across all measures. Purchase intent, I feel like I've said or have dared to say that the chicken sandwich wars are over and we've moved on to wings we've talked about, but purchase intent indicates that the battle continues onwards because this is the highest purchase intent item outside of those that were just a absurd value. And then for uniqueness, this was actually the one where I filtered some. There are 2 more that are more unique, but they did not have purchase intent behind them. I wanted something that was unique that people also wish to purchase. And that was the winner for this item.
This looks like a shake made by AI, sort of.
Yeah, or like a 6-year-old maybe. Like a beautifully talented 6-year-old, but the colors remind me of my daughter.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting. You know, we showed a screenshot from our scores system, which covers the US, but we actually have scores in Canada as well, and it's not all poutine, although this picture makes it sort of look like it is a lot of
the
poutine.
most recent items are in fact poutine, but it is in fact not all poutine, and that is something we can talk more about in that blog post. So these are some things that skew a little bit higher that we'll explore in that data. The Canadian data has a lot of interesting stuff for seafood, like a soft shell crab bowl would be unlikely to be seen here. Indian, Mediterranean, and beverage. So there's some fun stuff there.
Yeah. And we're going to do a real quick thing. It's going to take less than 1 minute. Hey, you're going to all guess which country from the world these new LTO examples come from, because we're tracking stuff globally now, just not just in the US, not just in Canada. So give these a quick look. Use chat. Which country did these hail from? These are brand new menu introductions from chains in another country. I can't see chat because I'm hosting, but is anyone guessing?
One person has answered correctly.
2 now, I think.
I feel like it's not super obvious, but there's probably little hints in here. If we had more time, we could stare at it and probably come up with a better answer. But the answer, Claire, is
the UK. We are tracking limited time offers, new items in the UK now, and I get to play in the data and see the beautiful pictures. And there's some really fun stuff there across a variety of themes.
Yeah, so make sure you check that out from us. And I know we sped through stuff. Claire, I feel bad. I feel like we sort of sandwiched you in at the end there in too small of a sandwich, but there's a lot more. Claire's available. I'm available. We's available if you have follow-up questions or want to reach out. Almost all the stuff is available directly in our tools and in Report Pro itself. And we want to remind you that, hey, there's actually a typo here. Oh my God, I failed my own quiz because the 2024 Trends event is January 11th and not January 7th, which is the second Thursday of the first month of 2024. So I just say January 11. So I guess I screwed up. So I feel bad for berating all of you for messing up that quiz, but I screwed it up myself. So I suck, apparently. But the 2024 Trends event will be a big show. There's going to be a ton of brand new stuff covered. Very, very forward-looking. January 11th, the second Thursday of January at 12 Central. Say it with me one more time. January 11th, that is the second Thursday. And if you haven't had a chance yet, Go to that link right now, datacentral.com/2024. I do want to apologize for the audio issues. It made for a strange and challenging start, but hopefully we got things sort of back on track. Claire, you guys were fantastic in working through that, because I know that's not easy. So my deepest apologies there. But again, anyone that hasn't gone to this link, please go there right now. I promise it takes less than 30 seconds, and you'll be set up for 2024 and beyond. Claire, do you want to just maybe hold on for a couple of seconds while we get wrapped up? And Claire, again, you have my sincerest apologies. I know there was much more to your piece, but hopefully we'll have a chance to do that in another public forum, or write a blog post or something else. But I mean,
Yeah,
do you
I
want
have
to
a report planned anyway, so it'll get used. Worry not.
it'll get in there. But do you want to maybe just talk about some of the more interesting stuff you've seen globally as you've
Oh, I don't want to
worked
give
through that
away all
data?
the fun stuff. Oh, the UK data is so fun. They have, and Hui knows this, they have so much to work with for non-alcoholic beverages. Like they're just they're way ahead of the sober curious trend. Almost all of the sober curious stuff in the US references stuff from like 4 or 5 years ago in the UK. So there's just way more cool stuff there. The holiday, they're like hyper holiday, hyper seasonal. So they'll do a ton of like really unique, very, like there was a panettone latte, like just like the, I could never say panettone, that's the color, it's not the holiday cake, but the holiday cake. Or they'll use treacle. Their alternative sweeteners are just so United Kingdom and fun, and they do plant-based, like way bigger than we ever could. So it's fun.
So as it relates to, let's say, like food, would you say that the UK is more holiday festive than we are in the US?
Oh gosh, I don't know that I can say that. I don't know if it's because it's been so long, but I was in Ireland shortly after, like before, like there is not like a Thanksgiving to like people are not defending that you can't do Christmas yet or holiday yet, because there's this other thing happening. And so they hit holiday hard. Like the second it hits November, holiday markets emerge. So I think in some ways they do.
So I should probably know this, but what is Boxing Day? Isn't that like a huge holiday over? What is that?
That's Canadian, right? Am I losing it?
Is that Canadian? I thought that was a UK thing.
Wikipedia is saying for Commonwealth nations. So I think it might be UK.
I think it's
or
British,
like
but I don't
European.
think there's like a hot like it's not like there's, I don't think it's why there's more holiday stuff.
This
It's
is
like
sort of embarrassing. I think
it's
the three
like
of us are
after it's
revealing our
like
ignorance
Black
in
Friday, but
real
not
time right
right
now.
That's, I'm confused.
Well, chat is saying that it's both Canadian and also UK. So really a lot of places.
Is there a food thing that goes along with it? Are there Boxing Day foods?
I mean, I think it's like a leftover situation too.
Huh.
Yeah, well, one thing I know for sure, and we saw this pretty consistently, is every single day of the year, at least here in the US and probably in almost every other country, there's a ridiculous number of holidays every single day of the year. And some of them, like National Blueberry Cheesecake Day. I mean, there's almost always a food one. I mean, you could probably look up today, and I'm sure there's a food holiday today as well. There's some big ones, but there's a lot of weird, like small ones too. It keeps it fun. Okay, well, again, Claire, we thank you immensely. I totally screwed things up with the audio today, and you rescued us and the audience. So thanks very much, and to all of you that are still on, thank you for sticking around. We will see you in January on the second Thursday of the month at 12 Central. Bye, everyone, and have a wonderful holiday season. Bye, everybody.
Happy holidays, everyone. Bye.